So I recently got together with a guy from my hobby. He asked me out first and I had some doubts that we'd work together as a couple because of the age difference. He's 35 and I'm 22. So, in my apartment, since it's an old house that was originally a single-family house, there isn't much soundproofing. And the floors creak when people move. I've gotten used to the sound of the guy upstairs getting up at 4 a.m. since he starts work at 5. And the sound of the girls in the apartments to either side of mine watching telenovelas till midnight, taking work calls all day and having friends over on weekend nights. I know when I play music or have friends over, some of the sound leaks through the walls. So I'd never get upset about hearing my neighbors because it goes both ways. So, when my boyfriend started coming over more often, he had complaints about the neighbors, which put me in an awkward place. He wanted to go speak to them or have me text them and I said no. For example, one of the early times he stayed over we went to bed around 10. He wanted me to ask my neighbor to turn down her TV. I said she didn't have it that loud and she turns it off at midnight anyway. At 4 a.m., he got very irritated with my upstairs neighbor getting up and cooking breakfast. I said that he would be done by 5 because that's when his shift starts. At 7 a.m., he was still trying to sleep in and the neighbor on the other side had some work calls that he said he couldn't sleep through. I offered him earplugs and he said he couldn't sleep with them in either. He wanted me to ask her to quiet down. He had similar comments every time he heard someone else in the building just living their life, especially if it was when he was in bed. I got frustrated with my boyfriend and told him, you can't expect to date a hot young 22-year-old and not want to deal with a 22-year-old's living situation. I don't know if you realize, but this is a normal apartment for someone my age. Hell, my neighbors are pretty great. Nobody's throwing loud parties on work nights. Nobody's having screaming fights. Nobody's having babies. The hot young part was in sarcastic air quotes because those were his words, not mine. He got irritated and asked why I was bringing age into it. And I said it's because he can't both want someone so young and also want someone with house kinda money. And he was being so out of touch with how normal people in their 20s live. He got really irritated with me bringing age into it. And even more annoyed when I'd respond to his neighbor complaints in the future with, okay, boomer. Or tell him that if he wanted me to have a rich person apartment, he could pay for it. It's not possible for me to get to his house on my own because I don't have a car and the buses don't go that far into the suburbs. So that would mean him driving 30 minutes from his house in the suburbs to pick me up, then an extra 30 to drive me to his house. Then an hour round trip early in the morning to get me home in time for work. It's a lot easier for him to visit me in the city. I am using boomer as a joke or a figure of speech to say acting out of touch and entitled to tell other people what to do. It is a common figure of speech to say, okay, boomer, to someone who is acting entitled regardless of their actual age. It's more of a mindset thing. I googled his property records for his house and he owns it with a woman who shares his last name. Holy shit. I don't know if she's his wife or ex-wife or what, but I'm out of here. I'm honestly freaking out right now, but I just gotta say, great big thank you to everyone who noticed red flags and made me question that. I've blocked his number. He can have fun figuring out where I went. I'm 19 years old female, was traveling alone on an 11-hour flight today. And a guy in his 20s is in the same row as me. I was exhausted because I only got 4 hours of sleep before the flight so I could sleep on the plane, but this guy, we'll call him C, keeps trying to make conversation. C starts off by telling me he's autistic, and then asking me if I like K-pop, and he keeps non-stop talking and rarely gives me a chance to speak, not that I wanted to. I tried to be polite because I have ADHD and I understand how social cues are difficult, so he probably can't tell I'm not in the mood. Over the course of the next 20 minutes I tell C maybe 5 times I want to sleep and put my headphones on, and each time, C begins speaking to me after maybe 2 minutes of silence. Finally, I was able to sleep for around 4 hours, but when I woke up C started up again. I'm still really tired, and I had some personal issues the day before my flight, so I'm also socially exhausted. But I let him talk for a bit before I start watching a show on my phone. I tell him maybe 5 separate times that I'm trying to watch a show, and that I'm not interested in talking to him right now, but maybe later. C still keeps trying to talk to me, and when I snap a bit and tell him I'm getting a bit annoyed, he goes into a full-on self-hating. I'm so sorry, I'm horrible, God, I'm just gonna shut up now, rant. And I feel bad because I should have been nicer to him, and I can understand emotions being too strong and spiraling. I tell C that it's okay, and I just want some time to myself as I'm not the chattiest person, but maybe later we can talk. I put my headphones on and watched my show, but C kept trying to speak to me, but this time I ignored him. Which was honestly a shitty move from me, but I just didn't have the energy at this point to interact with him. This was the wrong move, as he moved to get out of the row and stood in the aisle and began yelling at me. I didn't catch everything he said, but it was along the lines of, why can't women believe not all men are bad? Some men are on your side. I'm a nice guy, why are you ignoring me? He storms off to the bathroom, and I take that chance to ask a flight attendant if I can change my seat because he really freaked me out, and I didn't want to have a panic attack on a plane. The flight attendants were amazing and got my stuff and moved me far away from him. I feel like I'm TA because he does have autism, and I could have been more patient maybe, and ignoring him was a shit thing to do. I am 20, female, have recently moved out of my mother's house for college. I enrolled in scholarship. The other night, my mother wanted her, my younger brother, and I to have dinner together. It's been a while since we've spoken, and I'm afraid this might happen again. We were having a nice night, the dinner was delicious, and honestly, we were all having a good time. Eventually, we got onto the topic of how things were when I was younger. I made the comment on how her behavior when I was younger made me feel like I missed out on a lot of things as a child. She disagrees, and tells me that I'm being dramatic, and that my childhood was perfect. Quote, I was lucky to have a mom who cared as much as she did. My mother gave birth to me when she was 18. My father walked out when I was young, due to a personal conflict between the two. So, she raised me on her own until I was 7. She met a guy, and they ended up having a kid together, my younger brother. He was a golden child to my mom. His father was only a temporary item, as he left as well, soon after. Although the father of my brother was still visible in his life, I didn't have anyone to look up to as a father figure. Eventually, my mom went through a phase of depression after they separated. She started to care less and less about her children, and more about her parties and men she wanted to sleep with. It ended up getting so bad that by the time I was 10, I was a full-time caretaker of my younger brother. With the exceptions of the weekends he was with his father. I started to cook, clean, do everyone's laundry, and take care of everything outside of the boundaries of my home. From ages 13 to 15 I began missing out and losing good friends because I wasn't able to participate in any activity related to anyone else. I didn't get a car or a phone until I was 18, and even then I wasn't allowed to leave my house. I graduated senior year with flying colors and ended up getting a scholarship to a really good college. I took this opportunity not only to focus on myself, but to also help my mother realize that I was not going to be around forever. When she found out I got the scholarship, she threw a fit and told me I wasn't allowed to leave my responsibilities here at home. I left a week after the conversation. I did make sure that my younger brother was safe with his second guardian at the time. My mother and I talked on some occasions but never really kept contact. We got together, and you know the story. She told me I am an asshole for saying that she never really took care of me or my younger brother. I told her that eventually, she will need to get help and stop victimizing herself. But I'm starting to feel guilty, and that maybe I was dramatic after all. I've officially decided that I no longer need my mother in my life at this point in time. I'm now going to only focus on myself, and working towards a successful career in law. Of course, my mom won't take it well, but it won't really matter to her in the long run. Her children never really mattered to her. I'm going to stay in contact with my younger brother, though. I'm going to make sure that he doesn't possibly go through the same amount of trauma I did. I'm a 30-year-old male and my best friend got married last week. I just bought a house and my wife is expecting our son in November. So I let him know I was limited in what I could contribute financially, but did tell him I would try my best. So, I went to the bachelor party in Maine, I rented the tux, and paid for mine and my wife's dinner at the rehearsal dinner. I also had a gift of $300 that I was going to give them, but we will get to why I didn't give it to them. His now wife, then fiancé, texted me multiple times a day with updates. Fine. I didn't always respond, and it got to the point where if I didn't respond at least once a day, I'd get a call from my buddy. I have a full-time job and am redoing some rooms in my house, so I'm busy. She texted me for the following reasons. 1. My wife was not allowed to talk about our pregnancy at all. She didn't want anyone to focus on that more than her, the bride. 2. She was not going to order special food for my wife. No one asked her to. My wife was fine with whatever she was going to be served. 3. I was not helping the groom enough. He had to help her with favors, seating charts and programs. So I had to help him with those things, according to her. She also said to get ready to help with thank you notes after the wedding. 4. She said if I was a true best man, I would offer to pay for the bar bill. I don't even know what that means. 5. She had to read to approve my speech before the rehearsal dinner and wanted to be included as much as my buddy. She told me to make up things if I had to. I was also not allowed to include anyone but the two of them, and no inside jokes or stories about my buddy that didn't include her. 6. Her last text said to tell my wife to keep it together and not make a pregnancy scene during the wedding. Also, she wanted her to choose a dress that downplayed her pregnancy as much as possible. I was just so aggravated. I spoke to my friend to see if he could reason with her. He told me to just play ball on this one. It's her day, and to cut him a break, because he'd be dealing with her nonsense for the rest of his life. I was annoyed but calmed down. The day of, all the bride and my buddy do is scold me, berate me, and bark orders. I head down to the bar for a drink. The bride's mother is there and warns me not to get drunk because I've ruined her daughter's day enough. I didn't give them the card with the cash, and in the speech, I used my friend's exact wording about having to deal with her nonsense for the rest of his life. I wished them the best and told him I'd always be there for him, especially during the divorce.